Welcome to the All In Podcast, where we talk to businessmen who are husbands and fathers. We talk about faith, family, fitness, and finance, all areas of life and how they all affect each other. So stay tuned for today's episode. Today we have a good friend of mine, Charles Kinard, on the All In Podcast. He's from Mississippi and he has a cabinet company. He's a cabinet salesman and a cabinet fitter in the high-end residential space. He's incredible at what he does. And today we get to talk about faith, family, fitness, and finance, and his journey getting into the trades at a young age, doing fencing and different stuff, and how that translated into his own business as a cabinet company owner, and how his wife relates to that, and how she deals with him being a business owner, him building a team, losing team members, debt, all the stuff that goes along with business. So, Charles, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Charles Kinard, and I live in Olive Branch, Mississippi. And I don't know what other information that you want to know, so I'll stop talking now.
So we know him as 323 Woodworks on Instagram, probably. And that's where you can find him as 323 Woodworks. And he is a high-end cabinet installer and also my good friend over the last few years, gotten to know him. And we talk regularly, and so we have a unique relationship, primarily online over Marco. We've only actually met each other a handful of times in person, but I had some great times, and he's far better at cabinet installing than me. I'm just faster.
This is very true.
Well, today I want to tell a little bit of your story of how you got to where you are as the owner of 323 Woodworks, and how long you've been in business.
Yeah. All right. So I grew up in the Memphis area. I was homeschooled. And when I was 14, I met a guy who built fences and decks on Wednesdays. He was an activities director at a local Baptist children's home, and his day off was Wednesdays, and so he built fences and decks, and his name of his company was Fun with Forts, Fences, and Decks. And so we would build playhouses, prefab like playhouse parts in the barn when we didn't have fences to build. Sometimes we would split firewood that they would sell to make some money for the children's home. Hauled a whole lot of concrete, a lot of 4x4s, built decks, all that kind of stuff. And that's how I got started in carpentry. My dad was, he was handy, but he wasn't a carpenter or anything. He worked in an association in the agriculture industry. And so when I was probably about 19, I will say this is a little bit more in the weeds, but when I first started, there was a friend of mine who worked for this guy, and I wanted to work with this guy because my friend was working there. And like 2 weeks or something, maybe it was the next week after I started, this guy quit. Like something happened and he couldn't work for him anymore. And I almost didn't go back. Like I worked 1 week and I almost didn't go back. And I think like that decision probably changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Wow.
And I ended up, there was another really good friend my middle name's David. So Charles David. I had another good friend. We called him Chucky, but his name was also Charles David. And we were about 4 months apart in age. And he ended up coming to work as well. And we both worked for this guy building fences and stuff for 5 or 6 years. And, I found that kind of the more the finer the woodwork, the more that I liked it. And so I quickly got the name Quality Control because I would always say, that don't look that great. And my boss would be like, oh, it'll be all right. He was one of these guys that had all his tools just like piled in the back of the truck, getting rained on and like all this stuff. But he was such a great guy. Like he was so good with kids. He would get these kids from the children's home and other places to come work with him. And like we just got so many stories and just it's where I learned to work hard. He was like a second dad to me, and just really that's where I got started doing carpentry. And so from there, my buddy and I, Chucky, we started our own business over a summer. I think we were probably like 17, 18, and built a few fences and decks on our own. and got to the point where I was graduating high school and was only working probably 3-4 days a week, and a guy offered me a job doing interior trim work. And so I decided to give that a shot and did that for about a year and a half. And he had a little cabinet shop at his house that I worked in. And like, I think one of the first times that I worked in his shop, I still remember this to this day. He was like, hey, so his kids were homeschooled too, and so he would be like, he would come out there and be like, hey, do this, this, and this, and then he'd like go inside and like help his wife with something, and I'd be like out there by myself trying to figure it out.
And you're like,
And he
this
told
better
me,
be.
he's he's like here, build all these cabinets. I mean, we didn't have plans or anything. It's like chicken scratches on pencil on a piece of paper. It's like, here's the
Right.
cabinet sizes we need, build this stuff. And when you put the backs in, we want to do like, I mean, he was like 1/8 inch thick backs. It was something really small. And he was like, we need to do an 1/8 inch rabbet in the back of these cabinets. And so I did an 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch rabbet in the back of these cabinets. It was supposed to be an 1/8 inch one way, and then I think like, I don't know, 3/8
Yeah.
the other way or something. And I go to staple all the backs on from the back side, and all the staples are like blowing through.
Uh,
And then I'm like
Painful.
in there and like sticking wood putty on the staple.
Oh no. That's so bad.
It looks so bad. And he came out there, he was like, what are you doing?
So that's a super far cry from where you are today.
Dude.
Not the guy who throws all your tools in the back of the truck and get it rained on. I've seen your setup and you're super dialed in. So how'd you become that man who does care about your appearance and your professionalism and having everything in order and knowing where things are? What was that process like growing up?
So I think that it wasn't so much that like the reason that I messed those cabinets up, it wasn't because I didn't care. It was just because I was super ignorant and like literally didn't know any better. And like looking back on it now, like, well, I was like a complete moron. But I always think about that and think about the importance of making sure communication is clear when I'm telling somebody what to do. But I think that like all of the stuff, the tools piled in the back of the truck, like things not straight, things not square, like that was all things that naturally bugged me. And so it wasn't, I'm not sure that I was ever really taught, like, hey, I was once a slob and now, you know, I've learned to be this really organized person. I was kind of naturally more of an organized person, I think. Typical firstborn tendencies. But once I started working from the guy doing interior trim, after that, I worked for an interior cabinet company, a high-end cabinet company, and did um, interior trim work, or not interior trim work. We did installation for them. I worked in the shop doing specialty work and stuff like that. And they were a lot more organized. They were a bigger shop. They had like racks in the van where all of the tools went, and they had, you know, we had like boxes that we would keep our stuff in and stuff like that. It wasn't anything like I've got now, but I was like, oh wow, look, like you can actually, you know, stay organized and it's more efficient and that kind of thing. And so I guess from there, when that company ended up shutting down about 6 years after I started working there, and I started working for myself, I was just figuring it out. And I knew the importance, like the first trailer that I built out, it was like I got inside of it, I had all my tools laying out, and I'm like, all right, I got to build some shelves. I'm going to start drawing lines on the wall and like sticking some plywood. And like, you know, we probably redid the inside of that trailer, always were modifying it to fit a cart thing or something like that. And so I think it's just like every iteration of organization has just gotten better. You know, the next trailer we bought, I designed the whole thing in SketchUp, and then we got a transit van and then designed all that in SketchUp. And so everyone has been a little bit better, and we're just continually trying to dial in our process and just make sure that we're being as professional and as efficient as possible.
So you were naturally more gifted towards organization and perfectionism, which I can relate to growing up. Now, growing up, no one else in my family was that way, and I thought there was something wrong with me because if I made a mistake, I was like could not get over myself until it had to be perfect. Or I just wanted to scrap the whole thing and throw it out. Did you struggle with that at all with your perfectionism, or was it accepted?
Um, I don't, I can't remember in particular times that it was like, you know, people, it was hard. Like other people were like, hey, don't be so perfect or whatever. I mean, other than when I was building fences and decks, like my boss would be like, he'd always say, boy, just put a trim board on it. Like, and so, like, other than that, I think that, um, I don't remember that being like a huge struggle, at least pushback from other people being like, why are you being so picky kind of thing.
Mhm. So if you could go back and talk to Charles in your first year of business, what would you tell younger Charles starting out his business?
Good night. I think I had a lot of help when I started my business. And prior to that, when I was working at the cabinet company, I was put in a position of leadership. I was made installation manager and I had like a card and everything, but
Wow.
like nothing changed.
Yeah.
So, so they were like, oh, you're installation manager, but like, I couldn't really make the schedule. I couldn't make decisions in the field. Like other people were doing all that. So I was kind of like organizing the crews and stuff, but I never like we never had meetings with the owners and all this. And I'm like, how do I be a manager? I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to lead. And
Mhm.
so I just started reading books. Like I think when I was 13, um, like my sister called into Dave Ramsey to ask about some uh like value of our mutual funds or something from some money my
Okay.
grandmother gave me. And so I have always like listened to things outside of I guess my own mind to try to learn from other people.
Mhm.
So like my parents are pretty good with money and that kind of thing. And so I started listening to Dave Ramsey's business stuff like really, really early on, like when he first came out, like before Entree Leadership book came out. And I was reading like One Minute Manager, 360 Degree Leader by John Maxwell, Raving Fans. So I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm gonna go find books and like I'm gonna
Yep.
read books and try to figure out how to do this better. And so I would do things at my old work where I was like, hey, let's do a survey where we can like ask everybody what improvement. It can be anonymous and we can be like, what things frustrate you and what things you
Yeah.
think could be better and all this stuff. And they're like, oh, we don't need to do that. We just need to get work done, and all that kind of thing. So I was always like wanting to. I was seeing things that could be done better and frustrated that I didn't have the power to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
so when I started my business, I was like, hey, well, now like I can do some of these things. And so I knew like when I first started my business, it was like I opened up Entree Leadership and was like, all right, here it is. We're gonna hit this. I'm gonna follow it as step by step as closely as I can. Um, and try to make sure that I'm setting like a really good foundation.
So, and if you were to put it into one sentence, what would you tell younger Charles starting out in
Oh
business?
yeah. Sorry, I get distracted by my own brain. So if I go and don't answer a question, feel free to remind me. Uh, so I would say learn from other people.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess that's where I was going with that was that even my old boss helped me get started, gave me a lot of advice in regard to like pay yourself a salary
Yep.
and treat yourself as an employee of the business and have your business separate from your personal stuff. So just like learning from other people who have done something well, focus on those people and learn from their mistakes so you don't have to make the mistakes.
It's great. So, on this podcast, we talk a lot about faith, family, fitness, and finance and how it all intertwines. So, for you, how has your faith in Christ changed how you run your business?
Yeah, so our name of our company is 323 Woodwork, which comes from Colossians 3:23, which says, "Whatever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord and not to men, for you serve the Lord Christ." So in that context, Paul is talking to the Colossians, and he's talking about submission in different spheres. So it's wives submit to husbands, it's children submit to parents, and it is bondservants be obedient to your masters. And in that context, so it was Paul telling them, bondservants, whatever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord in regard to serving your masters.
Mhm.
And I think about like in I think it's a fortiori argument, basically from the greater to the lesser. So if in the sense that someone who is a servant of another, Paul is commanding them to work as unto the Lord to this person, then how much more are we who are actually getting paid for what we do? Like, we're not slaves to anyone. How much more do we need to be, can we do that? Can we work as unto the Lord? And I think it's a principle, like, John, who works for me, he's a pastor, and I always love when he talks about this verse because he knows Greek and all of that. And he says that word heartily means like from the soul. So it is working from the soul as unto the Lord, like it's your being, it's who you are. And so the difference, you might not see a whole lot on if you took someone who is not a believer in Christ and someone who is, and you looked at their work, someone who is a perfectionist naturally and someone who's a believer in Christ. They might both have excellent work, but it really comes down to the motivation of why. And so the motivation of why is the gospel, which is that we are sinners, that God created everything and humankind rebelled against him. And because of that, we are under God's just and righteous wrath. But he became man, sent his son to die in our place, to live a perfect life in our place. And because of that, sorry, my phone's dinging. And because of that, we now have hope in the fact that if we trust in him, the Bible says, if you believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, you'll be saved. Mm-hmm. And so Christ has become our life. Like, our old man has died, and he has given us a new life. He's given us a new heart. And so because of that, that is our motivation for why we do everything that we do. So when I say work heartily as unto the Lord, it's not just something that's like a good, a motivational saying or something like that. It's know that Christ has actually given me new life. I am a new person in him. And so he is the Lord. Whether people believe he is the Lord or not, he is actually the Lord. And so we are to work and do everything as unto him, because it's the Lord's house, it's the Lord's cabinets, it's the Lord's wood. Like, every single bit of it, we're working within the constraints of the laws of nature and physics that Christ is upholding by the word of his power. And so it's a recognition of those things that helps us to be consistent in everything that we do, no matter who we're working for or what area of a house we're working in. We always want to do it because it's all as unto the Lord.
So what does that look like when you smash your finger with the hammer, or when someone orders a cabinet wrong and now you've got to fix it? Like, what does it look like practically to do everything is unto the Lord for 323 Woodwork?
What should it look like, or what does it look like?
We're asking, what does it look like?
So I would say that I constantly have to remind myself of the truths of the things that I just said. So, sometimes it is very easy to remember those truths, that we are working as unto the Lord. We don't need to get frustrated. Christ is the one who's controlling all things. But my flesh oftentimes forgets that and reacts against that, and is like, I do get frustrated about this situation. I try to solve a problem in my own strength instead of first, praying about it. Um, I'm first like, I got to figure this out, and then get super stressed out. And then it's like, oh yeah. And Lord, please help me. how, how am I going to fix this thing that I just messed up so that we don't have a big delay in the project or like
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but so I would say it should bring consistent joy. It should bring consistent quality. It should bring kindness and respect to everybody that we work with.
Mhm.
But because of my flesh, it doesn't always do those things, and I have to constantly remind myself of it.
Got it. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, there's the what it should look like, right, with anything in life, and then there's the reality of where we're actually at and what it actually looks like. My business should be doing amazing, right? But we're
Right.
smaller than we should be, and we don't have the clients we want. That's
Uh-huh.
reality. Thanks for sharing. So, how long have you been married?
17 and a half years.
Okay. So, what's
Yep.
that journey been like as an entrepreneur being married? Has your wife been supportive of your entrepreneurial journey, or is she like, dude, just go get a job, I'm tired of all
Yeah.
the stress? Or what's that been like for her?
No, my wife is absolutely amazing. She is extremely supportive of me. I think that I am harder on myself than
Mhm.
she is on me. So I think I project onto myself what I think that she is, frustrations that I think she might have that she doesn't actually have.
Mhm.
Um, and she is really, really supportive. Um, and she's not involved in the business at all. So I like to try to tell people that I do all the scheduling of the things that bring in the money, and she does the scheduling of all the things that cost the money, and that's kind of how we divide everything up. um, but she has a full-time job taking care of our house, raising and homeschooling 4 kids, and it is a much more difficult job than I have. And I'm very thankful. Like last night, I was up till 1 in the morning doing an estimate. That's a whole nother story. And she didn't complain at all about it. And she was just like, she knows that sometimes stuff just got to happen. And she's
Mhm.
like, okay. And like, I'll try to jump in and help get the kids to bed and that kind of thing. But no, she's really, really supportive, and I'm very thankful for her.
That's awesome. So, for you, what would you tell younger Charles, first year getting married? Now they've been married 17 and a half years, been through ups and downs, I'm sure lots of difficulties with kids and as they grow up and training and discussions and churches and all the stuff that happens. Like what would you tell Charles year one of being married?
Um, enjoy it. Enjoy what you have right now because it's only going to get crazier.
That's real talk, right? Yeah,
uh,
it's true.
we had a just really, really great, um, like our first 3 years of marriage. We didn't want to wait that. I think it was almost 4 years. I can't do math. Before we had our first kid, and it took us like 2 years for her to be able to get pregnant. And but we lived in this little apartment, and it was like backed up to this kind of like right of way where there was some like oil pipeline stuff, so nobody could build anything. So there was all these trails back there. We could walk out of our apartment, go through there, go walk out through these neighborhoods. We'd walk over to Hastings and rent movies and watch them on this little like undersized love seat on our 15-inch computer screen. I mean, it would every Saturday we would wash our car and then clean our apartment and then go hang out with friends or play racquetball or something. And it's just like thinking back on that and being able to just have the freedom to just go do whatever you want whenever you want to do and not think about, okay, what are we going to do with this kid? And this kid's taking a nap, and this one needs to go to do here and do this thing. It's
Yeah.
like you have a ton of freedom, and that's not to say that kids don't have all of the joys that they, have joys as well with them. And I'm very, very thankful for them. But every stage of your life you should be content in and try to enjoy that stage of your life. And so I think that's what I would say to myself is, hey, just enjoy this stage that you're in right now, and especially the extra time that I'm able to spend with my wife.
Do you ever feel, I think it's really wise words. Do you ever feel like you were in the moment, you were just looking forward to the next stage of when this or that or the other thing was going to happen? Then it'll be good, and then I'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I think so. I Until I started working for myself, I really kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I think it's been only in the past probably 10 years that I felt like I really had a good direction and like a path forward in regard to where I'm wanting to go professionally. And so it was a little bit difficult early on because I couldn't see a path forward working just like installing cabinets for this cabinet company or whatever, because I just wasn't making enough. And like my wife we were living on my income, but it was super, super tight. And we were saving everything that she made because we wanted to know that if she got pregnant, then we could survive on my income. But it was really tight, and just, it was hard to see where, the growth could happen professionally, at that stage. And so, I think that I don't know if I would call it so much discontentment so much as it was like, I just didn't really know what to do. And so
Mhm.
I was just going to try to stay here and figure it out, do the best I can with where I am, and, see what happens after that.
So when did that shift for you? When did you start to find some success professionally and not just barely making it by?
It was after I started working for myself. So
Okay.
I think the highest I ever was paid at that job was $16 an hour when I was running like 3 crews and doing all this specialty work and all this stuff. I mean, that was back
Wow.
in 2008, somewhere in there. And then after the crash happened in '08, we coasted for about a year or so on all the projects that the company had in the pipeline. And then we started doing a bunch of commercial work, which then made money like really tight, because the commercial jobs are like, hey, you got to upfront everything and then we'll pay you. And so it was
Yeah.
like you're being a flipping bank, that's a whole nother discussion about why I don't want to do commercial work, because I've seen like 2 different companies go under based on too much debt and acting as a bank for other for clients. But what I would say is that, where was I going with that, Daniel?
I was I was asking when you started to find success professionally. You
Yes,
said when-
find success professionally. So what I was saying was, after all that happened, that we got so slow as a business, they were like, all right, we've got to cut everybody's salary 10%. And so I started then making 14.40 an hour. So I got a pay cut. And
Ouch.
yeah, and so they ended up moving the the entire operation 2 hours away to Savannah, Tennessee. They were leasing a shop in Memphis, and the lease was fixing to, like, the rates were going to go way up, and they decided that it would be cheaper to buy this shop in Savannah, Tennessee. It was like a 40,000 square foot cabinet door shop,
Yep.
and they moved the whole thing out. I think they only paid like $1 million for it and got a bunch of equipment and all this stuff. And so the monthly payments were going to be way less than the lease. Moved everything out there and asked me if I wanted to move. And they were still going to pay me 14.40 an hour to like move 2 hours away and everything. And I was like, man, I don't know about all this. Like where is this going?
Yeah.
Um, and so once everything happened and they shut down, because basically the reason they shut down is there was some big commercial jobs they couldn't get paid for. I mean, they were owed like $300,000 or $400,000, and the bank wouldn't float them any more loans to make payroll, and they couldn't get paid. They're like 90, 120 days waiting on payment, and they had to declare bankruptcy. And
Wow.
is at that time when my old boss was like, hey, you need to do this job that we have in the pipeline. You need to work for yourself.
Yep.
And I'll give you all the drawings, like everything's done, the pricing's been done, uh, build this deal. And so that's what I did. That's what put me in business. And so after that, I was like, man, I could charge like $35 an hour and do cabinet installations.
You're gonna get rich.
Uh-huh. And I was like talking to some folks about it, and they were like, well, yeah, so what are you thinking of charging? I was like, I don't know, man, like 35 an hour? Is that like too much money? And I was talking to my boss. He goes, boy, you better not charge a penny under 50. You're going to go broke. And I'm like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
how is this? How does this like I had no understanding when I was working for them about how much it actually costs to run a business. It's like I remember I got in trouble one time for going to this lady's house, and there was a trash pullout that they had ordered. Her trash pullout was broken. They ordered a new trash pullout, and they were like, go over here and replace this trash pullout. So I go over there, and I was able to repair the one that she had. And so I think they were charging her like $250 for the trash pullout, and then like $50 for labor or something like that to do it. And this is back, 2010 prices. So, um, but what was funny is, I told the lady she was supposed to give me a check, and she was like, well, what do I owe? And I'm like, well, I fixed the trash pull out, and I didn't have to do this, put this one in. So I guess just the $50. So she wrote me a check for like $50, and, and I bring it back, and one of the bosses is like, Charles, we need to have a discussion about this.
Not how this works, man.
It's like, it's like, a bunch of our like money that we were making on that job was the markup on the actual trash pullout, and so because you brought it back, like we, I was like, it didn't even cover your gas to drive over there,
Hmm.
basically, and I was like, whoa, really? Like I thought $50 an hour was like absolutely insane money that
Yeah.
they would charge anybody to do anything, um, and so after that is, when I kind of started understanding more of like what you had to charge. It still ended up not being enough because I didn't really understand. But
But you were making more than you were getting 15 bucks an hour right out of the gate.
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah, I was. And you know, I've always run my business debt free. So that first job that I got, because I had like no overhead, my old church was doing a renovation, and had built a new building and moved out of the old auditorium, and they literally let me use the entire auditorium as a shop for a month to build
uh,
this desk and these big radius walls. I mean, we built it, we finished it, like everything in the auditorium. It was nuts. And so I had all the money that I made on that job. It was enough to buy my first truck, a trailer, and like all my tools. Like that job literally put me into business.
wow.
And so
That was the one
that,
that was already priced out and handed to you.
hmm yeah, yep. And so I'm super, super thankful for my old boss for helping me do
Yeah.
all of that. I mean, because all the work was, it was already done on it. And he was like, here, you need to do this.
So talk real quick about being debt free. Most businesses do not operate debt free. We're kind of unique in our view of that, in that we grow slow at the pace of cash,
hmm
and people can think what they will. But what is that like for you personally, and even thinking about over the last year or two when things got stressful with different situations? Like, what was it like for you not having debt? Just talk about that for a minute or two, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that basically I've just been indoctrinated by Dave Ramsey for the past 25 years of my life.
Brainwashed.
uh, um, I think that his principles are biblical principles, things like the borrower is a slave to the lender, and he who co-signs for somebody else is a moron. And um and I think that that so I think that debt is really depending on what type of debt it is. Some debt is just really, really dumb and you just need to stay away from it. Other debt, you can view it kind of like alcohol. There's the evil is not in the bottle itself, but it can be abused.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that for us, when you have literally no payments and you don't owe anybody anything, you make different decisions. So you
Mhm.
have to pay cash for everything. So there's been two times in my life where I've had debt on something. Number one was I borrowed some money from my dad to buy my first truck. Borrowed like $4,000 from him and paid that back. And then the second time was when we had a mortgage and we paid that off probably 8 years ago. And so those are the only two times that we've ever had debt. All our other vehicles we've paid cash for. Any tools I've ever bought, I paid cash for. And so if you're spending cash money, like it's just like a studied scientific fact that if you use a credit card, it
Mhm.
doesn't activate the pain centers in your brain the same way as when you're spending cash. And so
Yep.
you end up spending more money. Even if you are paying it off every single month, you spend
Yep.
more money. I think the average is like 12%. And so you could say, man, I'm getting like 2% cash back or whatever. But they tell you all that to get you to spend even more money because you're getting cash back. But really, you're spending 12% more money to get 2% cash back or to get points or like whatever.
So
And
what would
so
you say to the young entrepreneur who's starting out, who's not been indoctrinated by Dave Ramsey, but all the TikTok influencers and Instagram guys talking about arbitrage and how to leverage debt, and Dave Ramsey's antiquated and stupid, and he's for broke people and all this stuff, and they think that being debt free is just for stupid people who don't know how to use debt. What would you tell them from your experience, like what it does to life to not have debt?
So when I was considering getting a bigger house several years ago and trying to figure out how to move and if I needed to do that and all this stuff, my old boss, who I'm still good friends with, I had a talk with him and he's like, man, let me tell you something. He's like, that house is paid for, and in our industry, you never know what's coming.
Yeah.
And like work can dry up, and if work dries up, then you don't have anybody, like nobody's going to take your house. Like unless I just literally am so broke that I can't pay my property taxes, nobody's going to take my house. Nobody's going to take my truck. Nobody's going to repo my trailer. Nobody's going to repo my wife's car. Like I don't have to worry about that. And so when I have an emergency fund to cover expenses and everything is paid for, then you make completely different decisions. And, you know, people can say it's unsophisticated and all of this stuff. I guess what I would say is like, I mean, I know some people who are really smart. They use debt. They don't abuse debt.
Mhm.
And and they're not like out spending a boatload of money, and they don't live lavish lifestyles, and they drive used cars and all this stuff. I'm not saying that it can't be done. Um, but I would say in general that debt is like a drug and our culture is addicted to it. And it's
Mhm.
because of the I want it now mentality. So debt allows you to have what you want now instead of practicing delayed gratification. And delayed gratification makes you appreciate what you have even more. And so the person who's following everybody on TikTok who's like, hey, you need to use debt, you need to go buy 10 rental houses and you rent one and then use the money from that one to get the next one and all this stuff. When I was talking earlier about listening to other people, I guess I have just heard too many stories, mainly from Dave Ramsey, but also, but also it's like
Brainwashed.
the it's the hundreds of people that have called into his show that have
Yeah.
have had similar things happen to them. Where I'm like, it's just not worth the risk. Like he went completely broke by doing the
Yep.
whole real estate thing, and there's so many other people who I've heard who have called in and have gone completely broke because you can say, all right, I'm not gonna pay off my mortgage. I'm gonna take the difference. I'm gonna invest it in the stock market. I'm gonna because I'm gonna make more money on the stock market than I'm gonna make in percentage on my interest payments on my debt. And so I'm making money, but you don't calculate risk in that. Like I said,
Yeah.
nobody's gonna repo my house. If you do that, somebody can repo your house. It's like 100% of foreclosures are done with houses that have a mortgage on them. It's a, and so, I would just say, like, you've got to do the work yourself. Like, don't just believe everything you hear. You don't have to believe Dave Ramsey. Listen to Dave Ramsey. Listen to, who's the other guy? I can't remember what his name was. It used to be Larry Burkett, but I don't think he's around anymore. But there's several other financial folks. Listen to them and listen to all the TikTok people, but don't just believe it just because you see a TikTok reel. Like, you're not gonna, a 30-second TikTok reel or a 2-minute, Instagram reel is not gonna tell you everything you need to know about investing and all that jazz.
Awesome.
So listen to everybody and make informed decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I think there are, like you said, there are people that do it well, and so I think people use that example of people who do it well, and it was successful, and they just say debt's good because of that, and they don't look at necessarily all the failure stories, all the anxiety and things that happen when people do go into debt and don't do it well.
Have you always run everything debt free?
What's that?
Have you always run everything debt free?
Yes, until recently we took a small loan to help with payroll as we built the shop, but we could pay it off anytime. So it was a small percentage of the building that we did last year, and so very insignificant compared to our income, just because I knew it was going to get tight for a little bit as we were cash flowing building this facility. So, but yeah, our property, all our vehicles, all our trailers, all our tools, everything, the shop, everything was debt free.
Yep. Nice.
So yeah,
have you ever?
I'm with you. I think it's the way to go.
Yeah. Have you ever done? Have you done it ever? Any rental properties or anything like that?
Not yet. No.
No real estate.
I have friends that do it. They do it all on debt. Even family members do it. They do it all on debt. Except for one exception, he done it all cash. But he's also single, never been married, and so it's easy for him.
So the one exception that, like, I guess this is a caveat in all this. Like, we bought our house with no debt, and we had to use a method called manual underwriting, and not a lot of mortgage companies will do it.
Yep.
And so I say we bought our house with no debt. That's incorrect. I meant to say we bought our house with no credit score. Yes. Yeah. So obviously we had to get a mortgage, so we were going into debt. But to get a mortgage without a credit score is a lot harder than Dave Ramsey and the crew make it sound. So we literally had to talk to 20 different mortgage companies before we found somebody that would do manual underwriting, and we were restricted to only being able to get an FHA loan. And so it was a huge pain in the butt. That limited the houses that we could buy, because FHA loans would not allow you to buy something that had like if carpet was missing, like you couldn't get an FHA loan. And stuff like that. And so it actually made it really difficult for us to be able to get a house. And so I think if I had to do it over again, and like we're thinking about upgrading, getting a bigger house maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, I don't know, we're talking about it. But if we did, we'll probably have to get another mortgage unless cabinet sales go through the roof. And if we did that, I'm thinking about getting something to build up our credit so that I have a credit score to be able to get a mortgage a little bit easier. I don't agree with the whole system of credit scores. I think it's dumb. Like, you can have $1 million in the bank and a 0 credit score, and a bank won't loan you money because your credit score is 0. Like, I want to borrow $10,000. Nope, sorry, I literally got $1 million in the bank. I want to borrow $10,000. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but somebody will, some people say use other people's money and not yours, kind of deal.
Yeah.
But because that's the way our entire society works, it's a lot easier if you do have some type of score. And you can get a secured credit card, I found out, which basically means that you take a chunk of money and you put it on the account of your money, and however much you put, that's your credit limit. So it's not even really a credit card. Like
Okay.
it works like a credit card, and it shows up on your credit report, but you're literally just
Spending your
funded
own
by
money.
your own money. So it's
Interesting.
really, I think it's completely different than a secured credit card. I feel like it's different than a normal credit card because of that.
So you
So,
talk about delayed gratification. Why wouldn't you just save up for the bigger house?
um, I think because the benefit of the delayed gratification might not outweigh the benefit of having a bigger house sooner. So if I saved up for the bigger house, like I said, unless like sales go through the roof or something unexpected happens, my
You're not
kids are going to be
expecting
so what?
that? You're the I'm the chronic optimist in the relationship, and Charles over here
Yes,
is
yeah,
the
yeah.
pessimistic stuff.
Daniel's always like, "Man, you're gonna be a billionaire by next week, so maybe we'll be fine." But just my kids are getting older really fast. I'd really like Jude. Like he loves being outside and doing all this kind of stuff. And he's fixing to turn 13. He's not going to be in the house that much longer. 5
Yeah,
more years he's going to be out. And if I save up for 5 years to pay cash for a house and move after it's about time for him to leave, I'd really like him to be able to experience, getting out in the country and having a little more land and a little more room.
yeah.
Because it's really tight, and it is 6 people in a 1,400 square foot house is it gets a little bit taxing sometimes, and so
Yeah,
that's where I think the that having a mortgage could be better than staying where we're at. So
yeah.
we're just weighing all
That's
those options.
yeah. I appreciate you sharing that because I think there's people in that spot that also might be indoctrinated by Dave Ramsey who might put themselves in a bad situation for a long time when really they could
Hmm.
just get a mortgage and have such peace in their home comparatively to the debt.
Hmm.
Yeah, just weighing that out because the debt isn't the sin, right?
Right.
It's just a choice, and then you got to pay back who you're indebted to. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, appreciate you sharing that. So, as a small business owner with a family and kids, the age-old question: work-life balance. What does that look like for you? You said you're up to 1 a.m. this morning, doing an estimate. So, how do you find freedom as a business owner in your time in relation to spending time with your family and church and finding that balance?
Uh, I don't know if I'm good at it. I mean, I feel like I'm bad at it. Everybody else tells me I'm fine. My wife's like, "You're fine," but I feel like whatever I'm doing, I need to be doing something else.
Hmm.
So,
So why do you feel that way?
well,
Why you,
it's just that if I have a lot more work right now on my plate than I can handle, I've got some things that have come up on some other jobs that's put us behind schedule. I've got John going out of town next week, so I've got to be in the field.
Mhm.
And then some unexpected like this job that I need to do the estimate on popped up, and it's something we've already done some preliminary estimating on for about the past year. They wanted something by the end of the week. It's a very, very expensive job, so I wanted to make sure I get it done for them. And so I'm feeling like, hey, I need to get this done because I don't want to be like all the other businesses that like take forever to get back with customers and don't communicate well and all those things. I want to be on top of it. But then at the
Yeah.
same time, when I'm doing that, it's making it hard on my wife. She's got to put the kids to bed by herself. Um, and then I was just talking to one of my pastors at lunch today about how like I really wish that I could be more involved. There's some things that I know that I need to be doing up at the church that I could be more involved with. And I feel like right now work has just been really, really kind of all consuming for the past few months. And but I will say this about work life balance. I don't know that work-life balance is really a helpful description,
Yep.
more of work-life integration.
Okay.
And I think that just as there are seasons in your marriage and seasons in your life where, I was saying, hey, you need to make sure that you're enjoying whatever season you're in with your wife or with your kids or whatever. I think that we have been in kind of a bailing water out of the ship mode in the business over the past year or so, because we lost a lot of customers and have kind of had to start to rebuild, which
Mm-hmm.
has meant that it's been kind of like starting a new business all over again. And so I've been spending a lot more mental energy and time on the business over the past year than I had previously, because before that we were just doing cabinet installations, and we had a few customers that we worked with. They call us up, be like, hey, we got this install, put it on the calendar, cool. Like that was it. That, they usually estimated it and everything. Like we didn't have, I wasn't spending time in the office doing stuff. I didn't even have to be sitting in front of a computer doing anything. And now it's like completely changed. And so I'm trying to figure out how that all works. And I know that like one of the biggest things I need to do right now is time blocking to make sure that I'm lining everything out. And I've just been like, okay, I've got to get all this work done. If I spend 3 days figuring out all my time blocking, then all these customers I'm going to be behind on their estimates and behind on these drawings I need to do. So I need to get through this like chunk of work, and then I'm going to work on the time blocking. And then it just keeps like getting bumped.
So what was your lowest point in business where you maybe even consider like throwing in the towel or doing something else?
I considered throwing in the towel. 1 point. um,
Well, what if
Good
if there
night.
was a lowest point where it's like, this isn't worth it. Why am I doing this? Like, this is just stupid.
I don't know that I ever like seriously considered actually quitting, but I have thought about it a lot. Like, I don't know how serious, because I haven't actually, like, I never started putting my resumes out, but last year was the hardest year in business that I've ever had. Um, and it was basically due to the fact that I had to increase pricing to be profitable, and the companies that we were working for found somebody that would do it cheaper at a good enough quality level that they didn't want to use us anymore.
Mhm.
Um, there was also some misunderstandings on the job site in regard to what we were doing to try to keep jobs moving forward, and that we would, in order to keep a job moving, like there was a job where we had to move like every single bit of electrical on an entire wall, and we were going to charge the builder for that. And the company we were working for got really upset about that and thought that we were trying to go behind their back and like double dip into the builder's pockets and all those kind of things. And it wasn't that at all. Like we were trying to be helpful. We were trying to keep the
Yeah.
job moving, because they said that the electrician couldn't be there for like a month or something. I'm
Yep.
like, all right, well let's do this. Let's get it done. It'll take us a day. It'll cost $1,500. Let's do it. And it turned into this huge deal. And like after that happened, basically, that kind of like the relationship really started going downhill. And I think there was a lot of trust that was lost,
Yep.
and they started using some other people. That, and also with the pricing, I think they felt that our pricing increase was kind of offensive, which in hindsight, like I did about a 50% increase all in one swoop. I tried to give a lot of notice. I talked to a bunch of people asking about it. I mean, like other business owners and stuff, like, hey, what do I need to do? Do I need to like just phase this in over 2 or 3 years, or do I just need to pull the Band-Aid off, or what? And it was all during that time in 2020 where everybody's prices on everything were going through the roof, and they were like, everybody's expecting it just go up. And so that's what I decided to do, and I gave everybody like a 3 or 4 month notice and everything. But even with that, I think there was some unintentional personal offense
Yeah.
that was taken in regard to that. And so that kind of hurt that relationship. And then there was another pricing issue with another company that we were working with a job that was out of town. And there was what we had thought we communicated in writing and clearly, but obviously didn't do a really good job with in regard to our travel rates and everything. And they felt like we were nickel and diming them, and that we were exorbitant, and just basically said, hey, we can't work with y'all anymore.
Yeah.
Bring whatever thing you have left for jobs that you have with us, drop it off. Like, this is it. I'm writing you a check. We're done. And after those two things happened, I was just like I was and several other people had said some things to me in regard to pricing, like, hey, I can't believe I don't want to be paying this rate for this apprentice guy. I don't feel like he's worth that. Mm-hmm. And what I was doing at the time was I found out that I was being really detailed in our invoicing, so people would see every single line of like, this is the hourly rate for this guy, and this is the hourly rate for this guy, and this is how many hours he worked, and this is what we did. And like every invoice for a week would be like 3 pages long. And I felt like I was being really transparent and that people really appreciated that. But it turned out that people that it actually ended up biting me in my butt, because everybody was like looking at that going, I paid how much for this guy, and I was there the other day and I saw him on his phone for 5 minutes, and I can't believe, and it's stuff like that. Whereas if they had just gotten one number, which is what I've switched to now, it's like you just get one solid number. So all that to say, those are some of the reasons of why those things started getting hard last year. And so I started having a lot of anxiety, and just to the point where I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Like, is my pricing completely wrong? Am I even going to be able to get customers? Where am I going to get customers again? My bread and butter all just disappeared. Mm-hmm. And then we got a phone call from a company who was like we didn't know what we were going to do one week, and we get a phone call like, hey, we've got all these jobs that need punch out. Our installers have gone AWOL. And we were like, yeah, let's try it. Let's check it out. And so we helped them out, and they ended up getting us to do all the rest of their installs that they had on the books, but then decided to shut the company down. And so that was a lot of last year. And so it basically 3 major sources of income just dried up. And we got to a point where I literally didn't know, like, we were on our last job of anything that we had booked for 2023, and it was in like October or something. And I was like, the Lord had just brought me through all this to a point where it was like, okay, are you going to trust me, or are you trusting in yourself and the amount of work that you have booked up? Because I think that's really where I was, is that before I was like trusting that, oh, look, I've got 9 months of work booked up and people are calling me and I'm having to tell them no. And like, that's where I want to be, but that's not that. I wasn't really being at that point, wasn't making me see the reliance that I had to have on the Lord, that He's the one that provides the work either for the next day or the next 9 months. It's not me. And my confidence doesn't need to be in that. And the Lord can provide what we need with like a single phone call last minute, or He can provide, work for a long period of time. And I had a good friend that I was talking to out in Las Vegas, and he was like, who owns your business? Like, it's like, you need to give your business to the Lord, and it's not yours. And you need to step back and remember, like, why are you in business? Why are you even doing this? Like, what's the purpose of it? And so I had to do a lot of really consideration about those things. And how much like anxiety I was struggling with, and Daniel had to hear about all of it. And And then, you know, that last day of last year, the day before we were going to be out of something to do, um, I get a phone call about a shop in Nashville that was like covered up with work and they need a bunch of cabinets built. It wasn't great money, but we were all able to survive over the winter, and everything worked out, so we were able to do that and do an install for them in Nashville. And so the thing is, the Lord has just been faithful to provide. Like, I've been in points like this throughout my life. Like, I was just thinking about this the other day, how there's is always really difficult, but the next step has always been better than the previous, but I couldn't see it at the time. So like when I went from doing fences and decks to interior trim work, like I didn't know that I was really going to like it. And I was at the point where like I can't make enough money doing this, and so I started doing this trim work. And then when I stopped working for the trim guy, I had planned to move to Missouri and go work for somebody else. And me and my buddy were going to go up there and work for this guy. And so I ended up quitting working for the first guy, planning to move up there. And I didn't do it right. I kind of left the guy in a lurch. He was upset about it. I should have given him more notice.
Yep.
And when I went, when we found out that this thing in Missouri, the guy was like, "Oh yeah, all those prices I told you I'd pay for trim, it's really half that." And then we were like, guess we're not moving then. And so I tried to get my old job back, and he's like, And I was like, whoa, snap, what am I going to do? And that's when I started working at the cabinet shop, and I loved that even more than previously. And then when the cabinet shop shut down, when everything started like kind of unraveling over there, there were several things that happened where I got some phone calls of people who were interested in work. And then I start like the whole thing shuts down, and then I start working for myself. And at the time when it shut down, and he's like, "Well, this is it. We're shutting down. We can't do anything else." And I'm like, "All right, well, my life is over. I don't know what I'm going to do." And then I start working for myself, and it's been amazing. And then last year, it's like I lose all of my installation business. I'd never wanted to sell cabinets. I've always kind of wanted to sell cabinets and do designs and do all the work myself, but I hadn't wanted to go into competition with my customers.
Yep.
All my customers left. So that meant that it was like, all right, I guess it's game on. Like I guess we could sell cabinets now. And so it was both like really, really hard, but also exciting, but then also ended up being a whole lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And but I know that every stage that I've been through in business, that the Lord, that I have enjoyed it and have been blessed even more than the previous stage. And so there's your optimism, is that I'm the pessimist, like this is going to be terrible, and then the Lord always works it out. Like there's been so many times where it's like I don't know what I'm going to do, and then I get a phone call, and the Lord just gives us exactly what we need. And I think it's it's like the manna in the wilderness, when God's given the children of Israel what they need every single day, and they're only supposed to gather what they need for that day. If they keep any over, it gets rotten. And then on the sixth day, they gather twice as much. God provides for them for the whole weekend, so they don't have to work, on the Sabbath. And I think that there's a principle there, in the sense that God is faithful to provide us what we need each day. And I have to be constantly reminded about that, because I am stubborn and not as faithful as I should be in believing in the promises of God, because his promises are there to take care of us, but it's the fact that I don't believe them and I get all scared about it. But yet when I look at what he has promised and what he's been faithful to do in my life, it's just a consistent faithfulness that he's had.
Yeah, I have this saying, and it's, how much money is too much money? So I grew up in scarcity, very, very poor. So how much money is too much money? And it's whatever amount replaces your trust in God.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So it's not a dollar amount. And you can take that into any area of life.
Yep.
How good of a marriage is too good? Well, that's where your faith is. Then it's not that the marriage is too good, but like your faith is in the wrong place. So it has nothing to
Right.
do with the amount of anything, how far out you are booked, or how much money's in the bank account, or how healthy you are, or how amazing your marriage is. Like none of that's what it's about. Like where's your faith? Because what happens if that gets taken away? If your faith is in that, then that's when you're wrecked. And you even
Mm-hmm.
got a taste of some of that, when you're dealing with, all right, what do we do? There's no work.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So
Mm.
we have a tradition on this podcast where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest, not knowing who they are.
Huh. Okay.
And the question was, have you ever taken a job that you knew you shouldn't have taken, but you took it anyway? And if so, what was the outcome?
If I ever taken a job that I knew I shouldn't have taken.
He's talking about like that gut feeling where you're just like, this is not a good client, this is not the right fit, and you took it anyway.
Um, there are some jobs that I've had that I wish I'd known that before taking the job. um, man, the things that I can think of are not really on the job itself, but more of like the pricing of the job.
Okay.
That's where what I'll typically do is I'll have a gut feeling and I'll say me and John will look at a job and we'll be like, all right, it's going to cost this much. And then we'll go, dang, that's a lot of money. And then we'll go, well, maybe it won't take that long. And
Yeah.
then we'll be like, okay, well, let's adjust it down. All right, well, how long do we think it'll take? And then we get like really optimistic. And then we go out there and the whole job blows up and it takes exactly as long as we thought it would in the first place. And that's happened so many times that we're like, okay, look, whatever our first estimate is on time is probably right. And we need to quit apologizing for it. Like, this is the price. And if you don't like it, then I'm sorry. You can find somebody else who I'm sure will do it for that. But we can't do it for that amount. And so in the end, I'm thankful that we had the work, like the install that we did in Nashville. It should have been twice as much. Like the amount of hour, it was literally took twice as long as we thought it would, and it was out of town. And so it barely covered all of our just bare bones expenses. But we were also still paid and we didn't have other work to do. So if you look at it like that, it's not like,
Yeah.
it wasn't the end of the world. But when we first looked at the job, well, I went back and looked what our first chicken scratches, and I was like, oh, look, John, look, we said this job would take this long. And then then we got talked into the fact that it wouldn't take that long. And
So how
so
do you learn to unapologetically charge what it costs? Because you're in the high-end space. So when
mhm.
you're talking numbers of install on house of cabinets and stuff, it's totally different than my world typically, where we're, doing a kitchen or more a day. So how did you learn to just like that's crazy? Like you could buy a car for that, and that's what that's what it costs to do this level of execution in this kind of a house and this kind of cabinetry.
I don't know if I'm good at it. Like it's still hard for me. I look at the other day I priced a job and a kitchen install was $33,000. And I was like, that's a lot of money. And then I was like, oh well, if they don't want us to do it, like
Yeah.
it was obviously an insanely detailed kitchen. I think we figured that I figured like 24 days of install in this kitchen or something like that. And that was one room. They had a bar that was going to be another. It's all integrated lighting and layers of molding and appliance
Yeah.
panels everywhere and all this stuff. So, but I think I didn't second guess that I felt more confident in that number because usually, I'll tell you honestly, most of the time, because I know people don't, see our pricing as high, which it is high. I think it's correct, but I also understand that it's high. So I never like sending out estimates because I know people are going to just be like, and I guess I'm becoming more used to the fact of like being more confident in my numbers and being able to say, okay, I just like, we just did a job for this much. This is how much it cost. That customer was okay with paying it. They said we did a great job. So here's the same thing again. It's a little bit more detailed, so it's going to cost more money, and we're doing it next year, so there's probably going to be a labor rate increase. So I got a pad for that. Here's my estimate. And, either take it or leave it. And, I mean, so it's still hard. Like, I hate doing estimates. I hate it because I'm just like, it's either going to be too low and I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, or it's going to be too high and people are going to be offended at the number and I'm not going to get the job. And I don't want either of those things to happen.
Have you ever considered hiring an estimator who's not emotionally attached like you are to the business and just runs numbers?
I'm not at the point in my processes yet where my estimation is dialed in enough where I can just plug it in and like tell somebody use this process and that's the number. My estimation is literally me and John sit down and look at a job and think through the job and think about how long it's going to take us, and then we just run that through a spreadsheet. Daily rate times this many number of days, here's your price. Yeah. And I know that once we get more data, or if we got, even some stuff, that would be hard to do. Like, I've started making a spreadsheet for installation several times, and I got really into the weeds on it at one point where, I mean, it was like, how many linear feet of scribing do you have to do? Is this panel between the sizes of 30 and 60 inches or 60 and 100 and whatever inches? And it's this price and this is this price. And it just got so cumbersome where I felt like nobody's going to fill this out. It's so much. And then, so I went back to, all right, I've just got to do a kind of a ballpark, like look at it and figure it out. Like, I know about how long these things will take, and I can look at data from past jobs where I have a spreadsheet that'll say, this was the number of units, this is how much we charge, this is how many days, so this was the average cost per unit. And so we can kind of do some comparison. But then I'll have one like that was thrown at me the other day that it's like, I've never done a job like this. So I have to take all the little pieces from all the other jobs I've done and like, well, the last time I did that, it took this long. The last time I took that, it took this long. And just put it together. And that's why everything is a rough estimate this early in the process.
So in relation to charging a premium for premium experience and premium product, do you ever think about, does a Porsche dealership apologize for their prices? Like, no, we're Porsche. Like, if you want Porsche, you got to come and pay. We're the premium. We're where it's at. And if you want us, great. Like, the broke people aren't coming to the Porsche dealership because they know it's going to be expensive. Have you ever been able to wrap your mind around that? And just like, no, the clients that we want, our ideal avatar, will pay our price because we're the best. Because for those that don't know, Charles and 323 Woodwork is the best installer in Memphis and surrounding areas. And so that comes at a cost,
So, yes, I say that all the time, but trying to get to where it's taking me a long time to really believe it, which that confidence is what's really important. Yeah. And I think with that job the other day, like, I kind of had that moment of like, okay, this is the price, the price is the price. And even, so this job I was looking at till 1 a.m. last night, I started on at 8 and I thought it would just take a couple hours. And I was like, I've got to get this knocked out. And it ended up taking 5 hours, and it's insane amount of millwork in this house. And I have only been able to talk to the builder, not the direct to the owner. And so it's difficult. Like, I'm trusting that the builder is going to be my salesman, and I'm trying to get a meeting. The last conversation I had was, I need 3 questions. What is the criteria for who is going to get this job? 2, who is going to make the decision? And 3, can we meet with this person? And they were kind of like, I don't know what the criteria is because they keep going back and forth on stuff. And maybe we'll let you meet with the person and we'll have to talk to the other person who's also bidding this job, which I'm not really bidding it. I'm just giving estimates at this point because it's so high level architectural drawings. But this job is it's over $750,000 worth of millwork in one house, and just about the entire house is millwork. And of course, it's all white oak, like riffs on white oak everywhere, panels, pocket doors, like I mean, just over the top stuff. And the one of the project managers said, "Yeah, they want the moon for the price of cheese." and, and it's like this architect's drawing all this crazy stuff, and I don't know if, like, I know that the people that we're competing with for this job is going to do it significantly cheaper than us. I also know that our fitting is going to be better, and I also know that our cabinets are going to be better. Yeah. And so I was just having this conversation with John this morning about this job and saying, we need to sit down with them and say, you know, there's a reason that you drive a Range Rover and not a Toyota Highlander, yep. You know, and we're the Range Rover. We're not the Toyota Highlander. Yep. And you have an amazing design in your house. And if you are concerned about cost, we are not the right fit for this job. Yep. And like at this point, I am 100% willing to walk away from it. I've spent so much time in this job looking at it and going round and round, and they keep asking us for pricing, and I'm just like, I'm wasting my time. Like, honestly, it's really so big that I'm probably leaning 55% more towards not wanting to do it just because of the sheer size, and 45% towards wanting to do it. So is it... Am I more confident? Have I thought about that comparison between, like, you know, a lower quality vehicle versus a higher quality vehicle? Yes, but I think that it is taking me a long time to build that confidence to be able, because I'm the pessimist, the eternal pessimist. And have the scarcity mentality. I'm like, what if I don't get another job and I turn this one down and then we don't have work? Mm-hmm. And it's just not true. Like, it's not true. And that's what goes through my head all the time. And so I'm constantly second guessing my numbers. I'm constantly being like, I don't know. It's just too much. I can't compete. Some other people compete. How do other people compete? Maybe I should just charge less and it'll all work out. And it's like, but I have numbers.
Have you ever considered at a high level getting a coach to help build that confidence and to kind of be your authority behind you to say, no, Charles, this is the right thing? You can just go with it? Or is that not how you operate?
Well, so, I mean, yeah, like I said earlier, I love learning from other people. I have thought about, I think it would be great to have somebody. Most of the coaches that I know about are generally like group coaching deals. Mm-hmm. And I would really need somebody who can like super dig down into my business. Yep. And help me to understand like if I'm off anywhere, but they would also need to be in a very niche market to understand my market. High-end residential millwork and fitting. Yeah. And where that fits in the space and my pricing and all of that jazz. So I'm constantly talking to other people in the space. I've got friends all around the country who do similar things to what I do, and I'm always talking about what's your cost, what's your markup, you know, all those things, and finding out what other people are charging. So gaining all of that information, but having that person that could sit down and be like, look, you're fine. You need to charge this and don't worry about losing work over it. And I think one of the hardest things for me, the reason that it's hard is because we have not sold many jobs. I think we've sold 2 jobs since we started trying to sell cabinets a year ago. And obviously that's not sustainable. I got to sell more than 2 jobs a year. That's a little bit unfair because it took us the majority of the year last year to get all of our processes up and running, to figure out our
Yeah.
cabinet lines and all that stuff. But I would say really for the last 6 months, we've really been trying to sell, and we've met with a ton of local people who I know personally and worked with over the years, and they're all like seem super excited. And then it's like crickets. Nobody calls us.
Yeah.
And so there's so my confidence is lowered there, and so it's a little bit hard for me to be like, yeah, I know for sure my numbers are good when I'm not getting work.
Yep.
And so that's what makes me reconsider, like, well, maybe I gotta figure out something else. Maybe I just can't make the margins I feel like I need to make.
Sure. Yeah, that's tough. Well, I know we're running out of time here. I don't want to keep you too long. I appreciate your time hopping on here and talking about your journey and what got you to where you're at and where you're at now, and the pain points of being I call it the trifecta of insanity, being a husband, father, and business owner. Whoever
It is.
signs up for that's asking for it.
Yeah, very much so. So, yeah, is there anything
Last
else you
things you
want to?
want to share with the audience, or anything you want to leave us with?
Oh, good night. I mean, there's a billion things that we could talk about. I guess we'll have to talk about later on Marco. But
We can always have you back on too.
um, yeah, I guess if I'm just talking, if we're talking to other business owners, I guess the biggest thing is take advantage of learning from other people. Um, and don't put yourself in a vacuum, because there's always other people to learn from. And so as much as I do think that a coach, like a specific coach, would be really helpful, I'm also very thankful to like the hive mind of people that I know that I'm able to
Yeah.
reach out to and get a lot of information from. So I'm trying not to, I'm continuing to read, to listen to podcasts, to talk to other people, to continue to try to grow and be better as a business owner. And, obviously in all areas of my life. And so continue to do that, learn from other people. And, yeah, I guess that's the main thing that I would say.
All right, well, that's all we have for today. Thanks so much, Charles. Appreciate you. If you want to look him up, go ahead and go to the notes down below. We'll link all his socials here, his website and stuff. You can look him up, 323 Woodwork, and what he's doing over there. And just amazing at what he does. And Charles, appreciate you. Keep on keeping on and sell more than 2 jobs this year, all right?
All right. Lord
All right,
willing,
take
he's
care.
the one that provides. All right. See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the All In Podcast. As always, anything we talked about, all the links are down below if you want to follow up with us. And if you could do us a massive favor, and wherever you're listening or watching this podcast, give us a thumbs up and leave us a 5-star review. And then share this episode with somebody who you think might get value from it. Until next time, go all in.